everyone. I'm Holly Gordon, and I promise we won't stay this long.
Well, maybe.
Well, maybe. I'm so thrilled to be here we were talking backstage when I was asked to moderate this panel with Melissa and Dale and Megan. I thought, my peeps. These are my friends who over the past 5 or 6 years since Girl Rising got started have been collaborators in what I would call the battle for peace and prosperity around the world. Mm-hmm. Because to me, girls' education is about that. It's about more peaceful and more prosperous societies. And we as a group, I think, can often feel really excited about the progress we've made over that period of time. And I just sort of like Megan wanted to throw out a question to you guys to get started and get the sort of measure of the room, which is how many of you guys feel as though the topic of girls' rights, girls' education and empowerment has become more visible in the world over the last few years?
Wow.
That's progress.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you that 3 to 4 years ago, we probably wouldn't see that. And it is not the result of any one organization. It is the result of sort of a grand awakening. Mm-hmm. And sometimes moments in history, for example, the very tragic shooting of Malala, that makes the world stop and say, oh my gosh, we've got to do something here. So I wanted to throw out a question to my friends to ask 2 questions. One is, where do you think we've made the most progress? And where do we need to be focusing? Mm-hmm. So whether it's issue-specific or organizationally, what do you say? Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Great. That's a girl up right there.
Be a good example for all the girl leaders out there. So I think very much to the point that you just made, that progress is generally, I think, where we're winning. Because I remember 4 or 5 years ago when I first got started in this movement with Girl Up, we had to make the case for support. Like, we had to sit down in front of people and really explain all the reasons why it made sense to invest in a girl. The economic definitions, not just like the human rights or the moral, but like make an economic case. And we don't have to do that anymore. I feel like we have companies, individuals, other organizations really knocking on our door, which is a huge change in 5 years. I think exactly aligned with that. I think every issue is really where we need to focus. A girl is so multifaceted. There's so many aspects to a girl. I mean, most of you in here are girls. You know that like there isn't just one thing that you care about, and there isn't just one thing that got you into this room and into a position of success. And there wasn't the same barriers for each of you. So it's very complicated, and it is very comprehensive. So it's hard to kind of pinpoint one issue, but I will say I would love to see more investment where there is interest. Because I think we get these great individuals, these great spokespeople, great partners that we couldn't do this without, but the world needs more funding, like period, for girls education, for safety programs, for just general rights and empowerment.
And do you find that the levels of funding that we need are you're not necessarily seeing them?
I think one of my jobs as the director of Girl Up is to fundraise, and it's a big part of my job. I know it's a big part of what we all do.
It's all of our jobs.
Yeah.
You want to make change happen.
And I think that every year we're kind of starting over, and there's a couple of really cool key players out there, but there's a lot of room for more. And I think not only just companies, but really wanting to see those national governments step up. And I can go on and on about that. But
well, that leads me first to Dale to talk about what you have a lot of experience working with brands, and
I have.
What can you tell us about the entry points and in that way?
Well, I think it's really interesting what you were saying, Melissa, but I think also we've had great strides in the primary education,
Yeah.
but not enough in the secondary education. 12, 13, and 14 is the drop-off point. It's where we lose our girls. And it's so radical to grab them. You know, I just came from the graduation of girls we supported in Kenya. And when I first met them, and I'll jump to the companies, but when I first met them, they came directly from a mud hut. They could hardly look you in the eye. 4 years later, I had 60 minutes to do a spot on them, and they are dynamic. They want to be lawyers. They want to be, the transformation is so radical, and we were discussing it together. And they were actually saying that if they didn't have that education, that 13 and 14 moment, is when they are taken out of school because maybe the family doesn't have enough finances. They are sold off. They are married off. So, and these girls, they would have been, you know, had circumcision. They would have been circumcised. They would have had an arranged marriage, probably to a much older man. And by the time I met them at 17 when they graduated, they probably would have had 3 children. So that's the radical difference. So it's the secondary education. So what I've been doing is reaching out to the companies I've been working with, especially L'Oreal, one of the biggest beauty brands in the world, $30 billion company. And I did put a lot of research together, went to Paris, spoke with the president, and I said to him that a beauty company creates product for women to feel beautiful. Then they have to create an action also. So for a company to do what they do well, and then what can they do for the feeling well? Not just the looking good of a woman, the feeling good of a woman. What can they do? So we created actually together, and I put a little bit of shakiness in him, hopefully, by saying that I cited a Harvard economics professor's paper that cited if a company today and in the future does not give back to its customers, it will eventually become obsolete. So it was just really, you know, essential for a company. I mean, it's logical and essential that when a woman goes into, say, a beauty store, the brands are similar. So a woman is going to choose, because we're the biggest consumers, that company that does more for women and girls.
Right. Agreed.
That's how you can change their minds that way.
And Megan, to go off Melissa's point about governments getting involved, I know that Malala and you with the fund spend time thinking about how to influence governments and how to pull that lever at that level. Tell us about that process and what you ask prime ministers, presidents, heads of state who you go to see, which is, I just love the idea of Malala walking in and meeting presidents and prime ministers all over the world, because she does, and what a great advocate.
Yes, I always love being at the UN and having the youngest boss, having an 18-year-old boss.
I was going to say your boss and you.
Because so many times we talk about these issues, there's nobody that is even from the communities we're talking about in the room. Can we just be honest? You know, it's like we're debating what to do about developing countries and girls, and like they're not even present. So it's really extraordinary to work for Malala and to have her saying, as a girl from an impacted community, this is what I'm calling you to action to do. And she did. You know, last week she spoke at the UN as part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals Summit that they had. I mean, you may not know if you're in this room that up until those announcements were made on September 25th at that summit, that there was no international agreement that a girl even had a right to go to school past what we would say is 6th grade. You know, did you realize that was the case? So the goals they've been putting in place are for 2030. And actually they announced at the UN this international agreement that girls have a right to secondary education, but there's actually still a debate that's alive and well about whether that means 9 years of education or 12.
Right.
So that fight's not done until March of 2016. So, and these goals are supposed to be in place until 2030. So think about what your life would look like right now if you had like the equivalent of a 9th grade education. Would you be self-actualized?
Would any of you be here if you had stopped school at 9th grade? I mean, I think when you ask a room like this, what is the primary reason you're here? other than luck, because we all get luck, it's education, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pushing leaders. I think we have to be really careful because I think there's a lot of energy now around girls. It's like, you go,
Yeah,
girl,
it is,
girls
right.
and women, absolutely. But if you have to go back and do that hard work of looking at real numbers about what governments actually do and where the money goes. So like sometimes governments will tell you they're supporting adolescent girls, but when you look at the numbers, actually the amount of money they're putting in is less than they were the year before. See, these are the things that Malala really pushes world leaders about. So she's been pushing presidents and prime ministers to support 12 full years of free, safe, quality education, but then also to actually put their money where their mouth is, and then also to count. If we say girls count, we have to actually count girls.
Yep.
And so even the First Lady's initiative, when she's talking about 62 million, what people don't realize is the number's actually a lot higher than 62 million. We actually don't even have the ability to know how many girls are out of school, because a lot of countries don't even keep numbers. So all of this has to come together, and we have to be really thoughtful advocates. And I think the other thing that's been missing is having more voices from girls themselves. And so when Malala went to the UN, she brought 4 young women with her, the 2 girls that were shot with her on her bus, Shazia and Kainat. She brought a Syrian refugee girl that we got emergency papers for because she wanted a Syrian refugee sitting next to her at the UN when she was talking about this work, and a girl from northern Nigeria where Boko Haram's active. And having those girls present is so, so important.
And what do you hear from those girls? What are they saying?
They're saying, what, I think they say so much, even beyond the messages they're delivering. I think what needs to change is how the world sees these girls,
Right.
And I think as nonprofits, we bear a burden on this. How many times have we put out an image of a girl from a developing country who's barely literate and barely numerate? And, what we're excited about in terms of girls' secondary education is yes, we should see girls from across Africa talking about physics and biology and, pursuing careers that any girl would pursue in the United States or elsewhere, and I think those girls, by being in those rooms when they're so powerful, when they have such incredible things to say, I think they do not only hard work of advocacy, but changing perceptions that are so old and overdue to be changed about how we look at girls from these parts of the world.
This is certainly something that we've really learned at Girl Rising, which is there's a real gap of visible role models. Visible role models so that young girls around the world see what they can become. And we're lucky in many global north countries to have more and more women in positions of power who are the visible role models for our daughter. And I know that Melissa's Girl Up really works with young girls across the United States to get them involved in fighting for girls' rights around the world. What do you see? Why is that important, number one? And what do you hear from those girls? What are they most interested in? What really rocks their world?
Well, I think you actually just kind of dropped the word luck in your comment before, and that's what we hear from the girls here in the U.S. and really in those developed countries, that before there was before Malala was on the global scene, when we were having these conversations and really introducing this issue to our Girl Up leaders, we were talking about those early marriages. We were talking about, okay, maybe you've never been to sub-Saharan Africa or to Southeast Asia, but you're 13 and you know what it's like to be 13. And think about what you care about right now. You care about your friends, you might have your first crush, your parents are annoying you, you don't want to do your homework. Let me flip that on its head and tell you that other girls who are 13 in other places in the world are going to be married and pulled out of school, and guess what? They don't have any friends. Because they're not in school, and where do you find your friends? And they would trade places with you in a heartbeat. In fact, they are dying trying to change places with you. And what we heard from the girls, especially when we first started the campaign, when this was really not mainstream, when this was not, the mainstream global conversation that we're all having, it was just this complete injustice, it's not fair. This fairness. And I've heard a couple people today talk about this young generation right now, they're not conforming, they're pulling the feminist banner back up. That's my t-shirt, it's very
tell us
feminist.
about your t-shirt.
But this generation is really embracing this because they're not standing for injustice. And I think that's happening in the US, it's happening, we've got clubs all over the world now that have basically risen up and said, well, we're going to stand behind each other because if nobody else is going to, we will. And, the Girl Up girls have gotten major advocacy wins, on the counting issue, on child marriage. And, we are really seeing these girls, they're not waiting until they grow up to take action or to be leaders. They're doing it right now.
And Melissa, we are partnering on this film, that took place in Rwanda. this, that the
STEAM
state
camp.
STEAM camp. It's the top girls in the sciences, maths, and arts from 8 countries, the US and 7 other countries in Africa. And we're partnering on it with the State Department and Let Girls Learn. It's a Let Girls Learn initiative from the White House. It's very, very exciting. And what struck me so much from the question you were saying and that you were talking about is that I was inspired by being with those girls. I was inspired by the future when I saw them because they are fearless in where they want to go. They want to be president of the United States, or they want to be, you know, cure cancer. Their dreams are big. So I think the work, what we're doing is helping them get to those dreams. They need help and support though. And the mindsets of the communities also have to be shifted and changed about their value, and not for them not to be seen as property or commodities, but really as future global leaders. That's what struck me from that experience this summer.
Raising the value of the girl
Yeah.
in the eyes
In the
of her community,
Yeah.
right?
That's what we can do together.
And I think this really speaks to what Malala has been trying to do around the world, and what you were saying before about every girl has a voice and can use it, and all of you have a voice and can use them. So we hope you do, both on social media and in your communities. You know, all the great change in the world has happened before social media, in gatherings, in groups where a story in person, right? People come together, whether it's in a church or a community meeting hall, and somebody who is a skilled orator, and this is really Malala's roots, tells a story. And it seems so simplistic, but it's really the way that change can happen. One question that we're exploring at Girl Rising, and we'll just throw this out sort of live time to the 3 of you, is this tension between, do we message around the value of investing in girls' education so that when you're in front of the corporation, you say, listen, you need more educated girls across India because you're going to face a economic pipeline challenge. You're going to not have enough employees, female employees, and we know that diversity makes for a stronger company. You're a father or a mother. You should educate your girl because guess what? She'll earn more money, and so economically you'll be better off. Or, and that's where we've always been with Girl Rising, a sort of hard-nosed economics. It's not just because I'm a woman that I care about this, it's because I care about prosperity and peace in the world. But what about shifting to a rights-based argument?
That's such a great question, yeah.
And so I throw that out to you. You know, I believe that education is a human right for boys and girls. I'm focused on the barriers that girls face to education because they're different from boys, having everything to do with what Dale said. Suddenly I'm a panelist. About your, you know, hitting puberty and what happens to you. But so what do you guys think? Rights-based, economics-based, or is it audience-specific?
It's got to be both. I think, you know, to add to the question that you asked me before about the companies, I would like to see those companies understand that that the inner beauty and outer beauty go hand in hand.
For sure.
And that it is very hard for them to deliver products and things like that about looking good if a woman or a girl doesn't feel good about it herself. And so that's part of the work we do at Women One too, is help them understand that how do we get to feel good enough so that we can do good. You know, if you do good in the world, if you do your good, however big or small, you feel good about yourself, and then you look beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so linked. So getting that mindset for them, and then their need for emerging markets as an economic value is extremely potent if you can work that within the industry.
Right.
So I think that from that side, I think it's really important.
So I think this is one of those moments where, like, I just so deeply appreciate that I get to work for an 18-year-old who sees the world the way she sees it. And, you know, I think all these arguments are so important, and we need to make them to policymakers. But I think there's a core truth that this is a human rights issue, and I think when you have someone like Malala that stands up and says that so powerfully, it's such an honor to work for her because she creates the space for us just to say this is right, you know. And she says in front of world leaders, she's like, none of your children are leaving school at grade 6 or 9. Like, I don't need to make an economic argument to you, you know, intrinsically that girls belong in school. Your girls are in school. You know, why don't you treat the world's poor like your own children? You know, and she asked this question, you know, and when she was preparing for the Nobel Peace Prize, you know, she did her homework, right? So she studied all the people that spoke before her, and it happened to be the 50th anniversary of Dr. King getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And so she studied his speech a lot, and as we were looking at it as a team, you know, I couldn't help but walk away from that speech. She didn't say, I want to see 20% more African Americans able to vote because the economy will improve by 35%. It was a mountaintop call to action. It wasn't incremental, it was a mountaintop call. And I think every group has to work together. There's people that have to have the vision to call for the mountaintop outcome, and then we come around it with all the economic arguments. But I think we have to be careful not to think that we have to have all our stats to prove someone's worth, you know. And I think what Malala demands is that there's intrinsic worth, and we have to say that that's the truth, you know. So I think each group has to find a way to work together, but it's not one or the other.
And I would build on Megan too, and I think this has been an interesting transition for me the last 4 or 5 years. We were making that economic argument because nobody was thinking about nobody even knew really what was happening with girls before Girl Rising, before Malala.
The Girl Effect, right?
The Girl Effect.
Yeah.
You know,
It wasn't on the agenda
exactly.
the way it is
And
today.
so you really had to go into a company and make a business case because they didn't even know this human rights injustice was happening. And I think now they do. You know, we see it in commercials, we see brands. I know the last panel was just talking about this. Like, we're all talking about the value of a girl in a different way. And I think what's really interesting and goes back to the rights piece is if you look at those global goals. You know, Claudia aligned She Summit with the global goals for sustainable development, you know, She 2030. Girls are in there now because girls deserve these same human rights, and these goals are built on these universal rights, and that's how we end poverty and we have a peace and prosperous world. So I think we're all making that adjustment with leaders like Malala and others that have just called us out and really called the world out.
We have to work in the talent area that each of us has. Like Malala has a particularly powerful story. So it's extremely important she stays in that story, and she can inspire hearts that way. So I think sometimes we have to inspire hearts. That's where I like to reside, in the heart area, because you get a lot of passion with heart. But sometimes some people, depending on who you're speaking with, it's got to be from the mind. And then you can mix the two. You have to watch who the audience is and what people's talents are.
And we're lucky in this space, I would say, because each of us have our place, and Hillary Clinton and Melinda Gates coming together on No Ceilings. I don't know how many of you know about the No Ceilings effort, which was a counting effort to find out the progress that we have made over the last 25 years since Beijing on women's rights and girls' rights around the world. So I'm cheered actually by your response, which is we think it's time to move from, hey, this is good for you, to, you know, to this is just the right thing to do. This is the next big movement. Of course, my mother, who's in the audience, came to an event. She's in the middle somewhere. Oh, there she is. She came with me to my friend Gail Lamone's book. My friend has written a book about women special forces serving on the front lines in the military, which has been happening for years, even if it's not legal.
Not Ashley's War.
Ashley's War.
Ashley's War.
Yes,
That's right.
and so it was a breakfast about the book Ashley's War. I recommend it to all of you. And she said, gosh, Holly, it's 20 years on, 30 years on, and I feel like you guys are still talking about the same stuff, which of course felt like, but we're not. We have made a tremendous amount of progress, and this combination of head and heart will be the way that we go forward. So see the film. Go and see He Named Me Malala. called me Malala?
He named me Malala.
Name me.
Yeah.
Because a story will move you to a place that you will never, that you won't forget. Bring your friends, support Girl Up and Women Won. And I'm going to ask you in our last 45 seconds to do one more to-do, which is to take out your phones. Take out your phones. Take your selfie. You have to be on social media, Twitter, Instagram. Take a selfie. I'm not seeing any phones go up. And I know if I were Alicia Keys, you guys would all be taking pictures of me. So I know you have phones. Take your selfie. Write your tweet or your Instagram post that is hashtag 62 million girls. And write something short about what you learned in school and why 62 million girls in the world should also be in school. And go ahead and do it, because you only have 3 more seconds.
And then take a picture of the person next to you and tag her as your girl hero, because we all have
Yeah,
social
great.
media
Tag her as your girl hero.
appeal.
And I was going to say, put these 3
Yeah.
organizations in your tweet, and so that we just
Hashtag
grow,
She Summit.
grow.
And then she 2030, right?
Yeah,
Nadia? Okay.
So, thank you,
Thank you.
Melissa,
Thank you.
Dale,
Thank you.
Megan. Thanks to all of you,
you.
and let's keep the fight going.
Hi, I'm Claudia Chan and I'm the founder of She Summit. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends and community. At She Summit, we believe there is a leader and change agent inside everyone, and our goal is to unleash you to lead change from where you are for issues that you care about to benefit your life, your family, your workplace, and even the world. There's so many ways to follow us if you're interested in this leadership content. You can actually subscribe to this YouTube channel, of course, but also visit our website where you can sign up for our newsletter and learn more about our community, new leadership courses that we're rolling out, and our 2019 She Summit conference. And I also just launched a podcast based on my book. It's called the How We Rise Leadership Podcast. So please follow us. There's so many ways to follow us. And I'm so excited for you to join our new generation of leaders to lead change again for our lives and for the world.